All right. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you all here. This is the talk Flutter Beginnings. It is basically a talk for people who have never used Flutter before. So I'm hoping you can maybe have a more smoother start. So my name is Manuela, and I'm a Flutter developer, Women Techmakers Ambassador, and a meetup co-organizer of Flutter Berlin. So who in this room has never touched Flutter yet? Okay, I see quite some hands here. So for those of you who don't know, Flutter is a multi-platform open source UI toolkit. And in this talk, I want to tell you why it is so loved by so many people. So let's start with the history of Flutter. So Flutter's history started in 2015 at the Dart Summit. Back then, Flutter was called Sky. And since then, many things happened, and we are basically in 2023 right now, and Flutter Forward happened, Flutter 3.7 was released, and Dart 3 Alpha was debuted. And basically also Flutter's new rendering engine, Impeller, was announced, and that sparked a lot of conversation of game developers, because that was a very, very interesting conversation that shaped our year in Flutter this year. So let's talk about Flutter in numbers. You can see that over 1.1 million apps were counted on Google Play Store. So there are quite some apps written in Flutter, and there are currently over 6 million Flutter developers on this world. And Flutter is on top 8 of a developer study for developers that were voting on which framework they want to learn next. And if we look at Flutter in action, we see that Walt, Alibaba, BMW, Philip Hue, and Toyota are having apps written in Flutter, and also Google Pay is written in Flutter. And in the words of One Direction, what makes Flutter beautiful? Here are some things that makes Flutter as a framework different to other frameworks. So we talked about Flutter is multi-platform. That means we can write from one single code base apps for mobile, for web, for desktop, for embedded devices, and that's very, very great, because we just have to write one single code base. So we are much faster in development, and we don't have to use other kind of frameworks and learn other languages. Then Dart is quite interesting. And why is it interesting? So Dart was developed by Google, and Dart syntax may be familiar to you if you have used C# or JavaScript or Java. And also Flutter has a GIT compilation, or Dart has GIT compilation and AOT compilation. GIT helps us to have a function called hot reload. We were going to talk later more about it, but basically it means that code can be compiled and executed on the fly during development, which is great. And AOT is good for production, for our production mode, basically, for our Flutter apps. When we are having the app startup time, it's much faster than other frameworks. Also, Dart is sound null safe. What does sound null safety mean? Basically, it leads to less error-prone development. Basically, Dart assumes that your variables can't be null by default, and if something is nullable, you have to be explicit. So on this blue slide, you see an age variable, and an age can never be null. We said no, age is always filled, it can never be null. But if you look at the variable below, favorite song, you see it has a question mark behind the type. That means it is nullable. And if we have something like we try to access favorite song from the user object, then we would get those squiggly lines in our IDE that would tell us, hey, you have to do a null check, otherwise you might have a problem. So the Dart analyzer helps us greatly during development. So then we have hot reload. Flutter is fast. So why is Flutter fast? Who in this room has developed native apps before? So probably you all know long build times. And with hot reload, that is where the GIT compilation comes into play. We can have real-time code changes and preserve our app state. So that means during development, when we change something about our code, we don't lose our app state and can directly see changes in our UI, for instance. And there are some cases where hot reload don't work, but those are described in the Flutter docs. So we have a cold start. We have hot reload on hot restart in app development. And hot reload basically means that we have an app with state. We have code changes coming into the Dart VM, and then it rebuilds the widget tree. And in the end, we have an app with state and code changes. For hot restart, though, we have an app with state. We have code changes coming into the Dart virtual machine, and then we have a restart of the app. That means we have a code change, but we have no state anymore in our app. So, also, we have a performance advantage to other frameworks. So, Flutter renders the app itself other than other frameworks. They usually let the platform do it. So, in Flutter, there's no bridge or web browser technology involved. That makes Flutter very, very fast. Also, app startup is quick for the end user. That's where the AOT compilation comes into play. Flutter apps run using natively compiled code, so they are also fast for the end user. And another thing that makes Flutter different, it's open source. So we can shape our framework, we can see why is something working or why is something not working, and can create issues and also fix them, open up PRs, so it's quite nice. So we all like to have fun, so let's talk about developer experience. Why is it so fun to work with Flutter? So we have hot reload, DevTools, community, and Dart. There are many more, but I'm gonna focus on those 4. We talked about hot reload, we talked about Dart. Let's get into the DevTools. So DevTools are our everyday little helpers, and they let us look into our app and see what the app is doing while it is running. And they consist of the inspector, performance view, CPU profiler, memory view, network view, logger view, and debugger. Also, you can check through the DevTools the app size, so you can see how big your app is and see what is causing it. This is how the DevTools look. You can find it in your IDE, usually. All right. And for me, the most fun part of Flutter, the Flutter community. So hands up, all people from the Flutter community. So look left and right. Those are the people that we usually see at conferences or at meetups. So we have a live community and we have an online community. So even though we might be apart, I see, for instance, Mateusz here in the attendees, who is from Poland. And we're still connected through Twitter or LinkedIn, because Flutter community is a worldwide community, and we help each other, we learn from each other, and we are kind to each other. And here I have another community for the non-binary and women developers under us. So we are the Flutteristas. We have monthly meetings, and basically we get some special insights from the Flutter team about Flutter sometimes, and also we have great events like the Flutteristas conference that happened 2 weeks ago. So if you're a female or non-binary developer, please feel free to join. Yeah, we would love to have you there. Of course, there are always drawbacks to everything positive. So here are a few drawbacks of Flutter. There might be more, but those are the ones that I thought of very quickly. So if you have, for instance, a new OS release and you have some new platform-specific feature, they may not be available instantly on Flutter. And also, Flutter Web should be maybe only used in specific cases. This is my opinion. So for instance, if you have a product that is very, very web app-based, it might be not the best idea to use Flutter Web, but if you have like a strong app case, that means you have a most of the user base is for mobile app, then it might make sense, and you just use web for some kind of little things. So it's always just a balance and to think of what you want. So let's get into the first steps. And now you can see here on the slides also UI equals function of state. So everyone who knows declarative development knows about this function. So basically in Flutter, it is okay to rebuild parts of your UI from scratch instead of modifying it, because it is so fast. And if you're coming from an imperative framework, this might be some news for you. But Flutter is declarative. That means Flutter builds its user interface to reflect the current state of your app. And this is why state management is such a big topic in Flutter. It's so often discussed that it is kind of like also a running joke already. Because everyone who starts out with Flutter is like, what is the best state management solution? What should I use? What should I use? And you can see that even the Flutter docs have countless like ways and packages mentioned. But the reality is there's no right magic trick. You have to think of your app and of your team and decide of what works for you, your project, your team, your app. And today I will show you one popular state management. I'm not saying this is the best. I'm not saying use it. I'm saying this is one very popular state management that I use currently in my job. So basically, the package is called Block, and Block stands for Business Logic Component. And it consists of events, logic, and states. So let's think of a login page. And we fill everything out, password, email, and we press on the login button. That could trigger your login event, which will then be handled in your logic. So we check if the user is authenticated, whatever, do those API calls, and then we map the result of our authentication to a state. So maybe it is authenticated state, or it is like an unauthenticated state. And that is one state management that is pretty often used, and you can see it quite often in some job descriptions. One of the other key decisions you'll make when you're building a Flutter app is selecting the right architectural pattern. Again, there's no right way. There are some specific patterns that you can use. I will show you later a book that is written by a great Flutter developer, which will be released in January, and which will also talk about some architectural patterns for Flutter apps. But a few things you have to think of is purpose and goals. What is the purpose and goals of the app? Is it just a hobby project, or will like 25 developers work on this app? Also, testability is very, very important. So let's talk quickly about testing. So Flutter has a quite robust testing framework. We can test for like widget tests. Widget tests test how a widget should behave. It's very great because in Flutter, everything is a widget. So we can test the whole app. My colleague Alicia has made a very great talk about it. I will have a QR code later on that you can check. Also, we have unit tests. I think most people know unit tests. It tests a single function, method, or class, and they're pretty fast. Then we have integration tests. Those tests are when you want to test your app on a real device or against a real backend. They are pretty cost intensive. They're a little bit longer, but also very, very important. Then we have golden tests in Flutter. Basically, when we think of the widget tests, testing the behavior of our UI, then the golden tests test the look of our UI. So basically, we generate screenshots and match our UI to our screenshots. Then let's go quickly through debugging in Flutter, or how to be a detective. So a big part of my development process is accessibility, and when debugging, semantics, so basically those little information that your screen reader is picking up and reading out loud. You could use a semantics debugger and set that to true in a material app, and you will basically see how your app is presenting itself to the accessible device. Another thing is what we talked about before, the dev tools. This is, for instance, the Flutter Inspector, where you can debug your UI and directly jump to the place of your widget tree where you want to go through this widget tree. So now let's go quickly through the voices of the community, because I think it's very important to see what other people are saying, because I'm not a one-woman show. So Alicia Ogonowska said, don't ignore native platforms. What does that mean? We're still mobile developers, so we have to set up things on iOS and Android. So it's good to know where specific files are. Then Esra Kada said, debugging is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but in Flutter, at least the haystack is well documented. Esra is pointing to the documentation, she said. So the Flutter documentation is quite extensive and quite great. Then Daria Orlova, a new Flutter GDE, said, learn the fundamentals before jumping to advanced tools, because a lot of beginners try to use advanced tools before, get frustrated, and then maybe never finishing a project. So learn the fundamentals first to have the most fun during development. Mangrida said, don't overthink, just build. So you heard a lot of stuff, state management this, architecture that. But what he said is that a lot of developers overthink things and never build. So sometimes it's good to run into your code demons and fight them. So having specific problems that you want to solve, then just to plan out everything perfectly. Then Norbert Korgius said, just get started and improve as you go, which points to the same notion. Mangridas also made this Flutter Designs pattern. I can totally recommend that. It's a great project, so check it out if you want to learn more about Flutter. Then Sasha, who is an organizer here, said practice, practice, practice. And Mateusz said, who is a speaker today, or was a speaker today, said, Flutter developer is also a mobile web desktop developer. Know what you build. So basically that means that we are not just mobile developers. We have to also know mobile, but we also, if we build for web, we also have to wear the hat of a web developer. And if you build something for desktop, we also have to wear the hat of a desktop developer. So know for which platform you build and know what is important there. So, and Sebastian Waloszek said, find an app idea you want to bring to life and build it, because that's the best way to learn. So, one more thing. If you're interested to learn more about Flutter, check out this book by Majid. It's Flutter Engineering I/O. You can get it there. It's a great book. It will go over Flutter architecture, state management, and everything Flutter you can imagine. It will be released in January, so if you don't have a Christmas gift yet, feel free to check it out. Then more learning. Here are some podcasts about Flutter, streams of Flutter, and if you're looking for more Flutter content, go to meetups, come to Flutter Berlin. I'm one of the organizers. I would be so happy to see you there. The Flutter community and Flutter docs, of course. So thank you so much. I think I ran a little bit over the time. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now, but you can also ask them later. I'm going to be at the registration desk. So I think we have 1 more minute for questions. So yeah. Can you show the previous slide? Of course. Take a picture. But if there are any other questions, feel free to come to the registration desk place, because there I will be sitting, because I see we are now at 20 minutes and I don't want to take away any time. Thank you so much.